This is HighIntensityBusiness.com with Lawrence Neal, helping you achieve your health and fitness goals. Become a great personal trainer and build your high-intensity strength training business.
This episode is brought to you by ARX, the most innovative, efficient, and effective all-in-one exercise machines I have ever seen. I was really impressed with my ARX workout. The intensity and adaptive resistance was unlike anything I've ever experienced. I love how the machine enables you to increase the negative load to fatigue target muscles more quickly, and I love how the workouts are effortlessly quantified. The software tracks maximum force output, rate of work, total amount of work done, and more in front of you on screen, allowing you to compete with your previous performance to give you and your clients real-time motivation. The ARX uses a computer-controlled motor to give you the exact amount of resistance your clients need 100% of the time. This means that the resistance can never become dangerous, is intuitive and simple to use, and can provide you with all of the results you and your clients are looking for in a fraction of the time. ARX is highly effective and efficient in delivering all of the benefits of exercise, including increased strength, muscle mass, cardiovascular conditioning, bone mineral density, and injury recovery. As well as being utilized by many high-intensity trainers to deliver highly effective and efficient workouts to their clients, ARX comes highly recommended by world-class trainers and brands, including Bulletproof, Tony Robbins, and Ben Greenfield Fitness. To find out more about ARX and get $500 off install when you place an order, please go to arxfit.com and mention HIB, that's High Intensity Business, in the How Did You Hear About Us field. So again, to get $500 off install when you place an order, head on over to arxfit.com and enter HIB in the How Did You Hear About Us field. Hey, it's Lawrence here, bringing you another episode of High Intensity Business. This is another episode that I recorded before the lockdown, before COVID-19 spread around the globe. And again, I didn't feel like it was necessarily appropriate to publish this episode at that point, even though we do focus a lot on just high intensity training and things like the carnivore diet. So there are elements that would have been relevant, but I felt like this would be a better time to publish this episode. So this is actually a feature I did on Scott Myslinski's Carnivore Cast, which is a podcast all about the carnivore diet. He so kindly invited me on the show, and I thought it would be good to publish the episode on high intensity business as well, because I think, and maybe this sounds a little egotistical, but I think you may be interested in my story. So I talk about how I got into high intensity training. I talk about my kind of fitness journey, the inspiration I had along the way. I talk a little bit about HIP Business membership if you're interested in learning a little bit more about that. And it's just a really fun conversation. Scott is one of my good friends. We've been friends for years. He's been a listener of high intensity business for a very long time, and really been one of my key supporters from the very beginning. And I was really happy to help him with his Carnivore Cast from the beginning, and his podcast has gone on to be very, very successful, which is amazing to see. So if you're interested in my story, learning a little bit about me, getting a bit more background and behind the scenes, then I think you will enjoy this episode. So please subscribe on your favorite platform to get obviously future episodes of the podcast on your device or wherever you listen to podcasts. And please head on over to highintensitybusiness.com/tactics to get free resources to help you grow and improve your high intensity training business. So without any further ado, please enjoy episode 277, My Story.
Lawrence Neal is the founder of High Intensity Business, a business resource to help high-intensity training business owners generate more profit in less time. He also hosts the High Intensity Business Podcast, formerly the Corporate Warrior Podcast, where he's interviewed over 100 world-class health and fitness experts, including Sean Baker, Rob Wolf, Ben Greenfield, Mark Sisson, Doug McGuff, and myself. I've personally listened to Lawrence's show for 5 years, loving every episode, and Lawrence was the one who inspired and helped me to get Carnivore Cast started. It is safe to say the podcast wouldn't exist without Lawrence. He's one of the smartest, humblest, and most generous and genuine friends I've ever had. Welcome to the show, Lawrence.
Wow, that is the most kindest introduction I think I've ever had. I don't think much of it was true, but it was really kind. Thank you so much.
No, yeah. It's all deserved, and really happy to have you here. So let's just start with my audience. Some of them will be familiar, some won't, but what is high intensity training and what is high intensity business, your business?
Yeah, sure. Okay, so where to start? What is high intensity training? So I'm going to do my best to keep this relatively simple. So high intensity training is really, really ambiguous because it's kind of become a bit of a cliche. You know, someone asks me, Lawrence, how do you exercise? And I say I do high intensity training, and they say to me, oh yeah, I do the same thing. And I'm pretty certain that 99.9% of the time that is not true, and that they're doing something completely different. They're doing some kind of high intensity interval training or something similar to that. But originally, high intensity training was, I suppose, kind of invented by the late Arthur Jones, who I think popularized it around the 1970s. And then there's a handful of other people who have since sort of taken the torch and worked on high intensity training, developed it as a way of exercising and marketed it. And what it is exactly is a form of resistance training done with either machines or free weights or body weight. Typically where you're doing maybe in the region of 5 to 12 exercises, both compound and so multi-joint and single joint exercises. So anything from sort of chest presses and pull downs and chin ups to things like leg extensions and bicep curls. And typically sets are done to a single set to muscular failure, whereas traditional training would take more of a multi-set approach. I would say due to the focus on intensity and really training hard and training to muscular failure, by virtue of that, the workout regimes tend to be slightly more infrequent and briefer in duration. So the average workout probably lasts anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes. And typically most trainees work out once or twice a week and maybe 3 times a week on the more extreme end. So that's kind of in a nutshell what high intensity training is. I will just say I think, my goal really, whilst I talk a lot about high intensity training and that's very much what my brand is about in a way. I'm just really happy to see anyone doing safe forms of strength training, whether that's HIIT or something that's more maybe traditional, which has multiple sets. I'm really not too fussed because I think at the end of the day, the evidence seems to support that the outcomes are the same. If you're doing this type of training, so long as you are working to a high degree of relative intensity, which Scott can attest to because he's tried all sorts of different protocols. And then moving on to myself and my business. So my website is highintensitybusiness.com. And what we do there is we help high intensity training business owners grow their business, in terms of helping them with every function of the business, like sales and marketing and retention and pricing and packaging and hiring, etc. But we also help them with the operation and the personal training side of things. And so I do a lot of content on, everything with regard to personal training. And obviously, as I said just now, the high intensity training business side of things. It's kind of, changed over time. So when I first started the podcast, as you alluded to in the introduction, it was called Corporate Warrior. And that was when I was more focused on the category of just optimizing lifestyle, for busy people, which was something and is something I'm still very interested in. And it's probably why I got you, interested in the show in the beginning, Scott, I'm sure was a big part of that. And, in trying to find my own voice and trying to build a business, I niched down over time to really focus on this very, very niche group of individuals who are passionate about what I'm passionate about, which is high intensity training and growing businesses in this area, and then trying to help them be successful. So yeah, that's that.
Yeah, that's an awesome introduction of both high intensity training and what you do. Really helpful. And who is high intensity training for? And maybe how did you personally discover it? Is this something, some people would say it's only for old people. Some people think high intensity, that's only for like people who are really intense, super into fitness training. Who's it for? And how did you personally come about it? Talk us through that journey a little bit.
Yeah, so I'll just start off with my own journey. So I've always been into health and fitness probably since my mid-teens. So from like the age of probably 15, 16, I got the bodybuilding bug, just like most young men out there, and tried everything under the sun to try and get the best results and try and build big muscles. And so I was trying lots of different protocols, lots of different workout programs. And along that journey, I started to move more towards, training that just seemed to be more evidence-based, that seemed smarter in its design. And the first step in that direction was really picking up the Spartan Health regime, which has a bit of a hyperbolic title. But basically it was an ebook based on the training and principles practiced by the Spartans. So it was very romantic and very appealing to me at the young age of 20. I think I was 21, 22, and I picked that up. But it was brief in its training design. Most workouts would be 2 or 3 exercises, but it was quite frequent. I was training kind of 6 to 8 times a week, doing various different exercise, be it strength training or grip work or running or basketball. And some people might not call those things exercise and put them in the recreation category, but we're not really here to debate that right now. And then after that, it's kind of hard to try and pinpoint the moments, isn't it? But I think some of the main events that really led me down the high intensity training rabbit hole were coming across Dr. Doug McGuff's presentation on the 21 convention, which I think you've seen. I've watched it multiple times. I think everyone in here has seen that practically. It's just a wonderful presentation. You can find it on YouTube. I'm sure Scott will link it up. It's about, I think, 2 hours in length, but it's a phenomenal presentation where Doug essentially gives you a crash course in biochemistry, talks you through how the cells in the body metabolize substrate and how that all works and how muscle gain works and fat loss and the role that exercise plays in all of that. And I'd never seen exercise articulated and talked about in such an intelligent way that really triggered my curiosity. And then I think from there, I read his book, Body by Science, which is probably my favorite health and fitness book ever. And then that was it. And then after that, I was sold. I started practicing it for myself. I literally, and this is no word of a lie, no exaggeration, I reduced my training down from what at the time was probably, as I said, 6 to 8 sessions to 1 hard session a week. Now, I was still playing basketball, but probably only playing like once a week. So call that 2 times. I was doing some kind of activity every week. But my training session was only 15 minutes as well. And so I did that and I kept that up and my results were better. I put on more muscle mass, not a great deal of muscle because I'd already got probably a lot of my noob gains, as they say, and my genetics, I'm sort of predisposed to more of a lighter muscled physique anyway. But I was able to burn body fat, probably getting the best body composition, for me. And I felt great, had high energy. So yeah, massive gain in efficiency, from my point of view. And so from then on, it was like, I just developed a real passion for it. And then that really drove me to want to create, obviously my business in it because, I was so passionate about it. And, I was passionate about trying to promote it and increase the awareness of high intensity training to the masses. But there was a second part to the question.
Yeah, no, that's a really helpful overview. And I just want to reiterate, I think you've said it twice now, but people so often get confused. They call high intensity interval training, which is something done on a Wingate or a rower or a treadmill or a hill, or with something like burpees. They call that HIIT. or they call that high intensity training. What Lawrence is talking about is distinctly different and only involves, using slow, controlled resistance training to failure. And it's high intensity because you go all the way to concentric muscle failure. I just want to hit that point home one more time, Lawrence, even though you already made it, because people so often get that confused. I feel like it bears repeating. The other part of the question was, who is high intensity training for?
Yeah, firstly, you described that much better than me, and I left out some of the key tenets such as safety and controlled cadence and things like that. So I appreciate you
no worries.
hammering that home. Who's it for? So obviously this is going to sound really cringe, but it's basically for everyone. Whether you're a teenager who is looking to get a better performance in their sport, or is just looking to build muscle, it's ideal for you. If you're a senior person who is trying to regain function or regain lost muscle or bone mineral density or quality of life, then it's absolutely for you and everyone in between. Just tangentially related to this, I do think where some businesses go wrong in this area is that they try to target everyone. It's very tempting when you discover HIIT that you're like, oh, everyone needs this, therefore we must promote it to everyone. But as many of us know in business, if you try and target and market to everyone, you market to no one. And so I do, if there's anyone listening to this who is either thinking about starting a business in HIIT or has one and is struggling, I would really encourage you to review this side of your marketing and decide who it is that you're actually marketing and selling to, because it won't alienate the rest of them, that you will still get people from those other demographics I just mentioned come through your door. But you really need to figure out who is a good fit for you, your values, your goals, your business. And that differs depending on, what your goals and your vision is for your particular studio.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, and I like how you talked about targeting an audience, but then of course you'll get other people. And what are some of the potential downsides of high intensity training in your mind, or who is it not for? Who would you say, high intensity training probably not right for you?
Scott, there is no downsides to high intensity.
It's a magic bullet.
I'm kidding. Yeah, I would say the first thing that comes to mind is if you're and I think this is mostly going to resonate with the younger listeners. If you love being in the gym all the time, and it's like almost a social event for you, and something that you really enjoy and you like going frequently, then I'm not going to tell you to stop going and only go once or twice or maximum 3 times per week, because, you clearly get a lot of value out of going frequently. And so for those people, I think I'd be concerned with other things that those people might be doing that might be harming their joints and things like that, exercises that really aren't that safe. But in terms of the volume and frequency, I don't really see any issue with what they are currently doing. So I would say that those particular individuals, I honestly struggle to think who else might not be a good fit, because I could practically argue the value of a high intensity training regimen to most types of people of different ages. Because, I was thinking about, obviously before we did this podcast, Scott, I was asking you, who, I could make a guess of the type of people that listen to your show. I listen to your show, but I wanted to ask you to understand, who might be listening to this, and who would get, obviously, how I could then add the most value. And I think one of the things you mentioned is, a lot of people that listen to this are family people, so they're probably quite time poor. I mean, a lot of us these days are quite time starved, and so anything that's efficient is attractive. And the beauty of high intensity training is, as I said at the start of this podcast, it only takes, if you're doing it correctly, you're only in the facility for 15 to 30 minutes, and you only need to train once or twice a week, and you will get all of the benefits in terms of cardiorespiratory adaptations, muscle gain, strength, improvements in bone mineral density, improvements to function and quality of life. I am really scratching the surface. That is the tip of the iceberg. The benefits from resistance training are just vast. And the stuff we're starting to discover now around the hormonal effects, the myokines, is just super exciting. And so I think that the return on investment on a mere 15 to 30 minutes training in this way once or twice a week is enormous. So if you're someone who is sitting there going, you know what, I want to exercise. I know I should perhaps do resistance training, but I can't possibly find the time to do it in my current schedule, then this is your solution. And so I encourage you, because I know, Scott, I'm assuming like 90% of your listeners are in the States. You guys have a ubiquity of high intensity training studios around the country. So I would Google your local studio and I would go and have a workout. Most of them do free consultations. You've got nothing to lose. It's only upside. Sorry, Guy. I've got another point, but you can interject, Scott.
No, go ahead.
The other thing, I think, if your listenership, I know, has some, older people within it. And so for those people that might be scared of the words intensity or high intensity, which is completely understandable. It's, they're quite kind of aggressive words. This is actually, ironically, probably one of the safest methods of exercise, if not the safest you can embark upon. And the reason for that is because although we are lifting heavy loads or moderate to heavy loads typically, and we're training to muscular failure, which again has scary connotations, the word failure, it's actually incredibly safe. And the reason for that is because you're moving, as you hinted at, Scott, a very slow tempo. You're moving through each repetition, the positive and the negative excursion of the repetition, in a very smooth fashion. And when you reach either end of the movement, you should be using a very smooth turnaround. So that means it's very, very safe on the joints, in the body. So you're very unlikely you will, have any high force on those joints, which might then cause an injury. And similarly, in terms of the training to failure, all that means is that as you're going through a set of high intensity training, you're recruiting all of the muscle fibers in your muscles. And so your muscle fibers are made up of slow and fast twitch muscle fibers. And we know unequivocally that in order to produce maximum adaptations from training, so all the benefits you get for your health, you need to recruit and fatigue the full spectrum muscle fibers. So that's the type 1, the type 2, the slow, fast twitch. And the only way to do that we know of is to actually train to a high level of intensity. Now, in terms of whether you need to train to failure, that's kind of up for debate. Some people would attest that so long as you train close to failure, you're going to get the same outcomes, and maybe that's true. But the reason I like to train to failure is because you can just make sure you've done it. You've done the job. If you've gone there, you've pretty much recruited all of the muscle fibers, and that's going to start the cascade for all of the positive health benefits that you're going to get from high intensity training.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I think for folks who are afraid of the safety at all, if you can just picture yourself doing push-ups and keeping doing push-ups until you literally try to push yourself off the ground and you get halfway up, and then you sort of safely lower yourself back down. That's what going to failure means. So it's not like you're doing something where you're throwing a weight over your head or doing a clean and jerk or, a heavy deadlift off the ground or something like that. And then, you fail in the middle of the rep and you injure yourself. No, it's very controlled movements, safe movements where stopping in the middle might cause, some discomfort and some contractions in your muscles, but it's extremely safe.
Absolutely.
And Lawrence, you've mentioned a lot of them. Doug McGuff, I point people to your podcast, but what are some other resources for people who want to learn more about high intensity training, maybe check out videos on it or read about it before diving in or going to a studio near them, or maybe they don't have one near them?
Yeah, I would, first obviously point them to Doug McGuff's work, Body by Science. I would just look at Doug's YouTube video, which I believe is just Doug McGuff on YouTube. And I think that's a great place to start. Doug has some videos way back in the archive where he talks about high intensity training and the benefits in a very wonderful way. I don't think there's anyone on the planet who articulates it as well as he does, because he really meets people where they are. It's something actually you've been doing really well, Scott, during this interview is explaining what I'm saying in an even more lay way, which I think is really important, because it's so easy to forget that when someone's first coming across this stuff, they don't know as much as you might know. And so they're not going to perhaps understand what you mean when you're talking about it. And I think Doug does that wonderfully well in a lot of his early videos in terms of providing analogy to help people understand just what this type of training is doing for them and why it's probably the best approach out there for most people. So aside from his resources, I'm not going to plug my own because
Go ahead.
Sure we've kind of already done that, but maybe some of my early podcasts would be helpful.
Yeah,
but to be honest, I would rather not say anything beyond that, because I don't want to overwhelm people.
Yeah,
and I think actually that they'll get what they need from most of Doug's work. I think.
That's a great way to put it. And of course, there are many other resources, but yeah, it's good to start small.
This episode is brought to you by our sponsor, ARX. Are you looking to create a cutting-edge, high-intensity training facility? Are you confused on what equipment to use or how to separate yourself from the masses? Well, then ARX Fit might be the answer you're looking for. I asked Mike Polano from ARX a few questions about how ARX machines are challenging the status quo of the exercise industry around the globe. Mike, if you could, give the listeners a quick summary of why ARX is so different from the traditional machines or tools they're used to seeing in most exercise facilities.
ARX is totally different than anything you've seen before. This isn't just another weight stack machine. We've looked at the last 40 years of exercise technology and used that knowledge to create something entirely new. ARX uses a new form of resistance, a motor, and we pair that motor with computer software so that we can maximize the safety, effectiveness, and efficiency of your workouts. So you may be asking, okay, but how does ARX compare to weights? Traditional machines you see in gyms today are based on lifting metal weights and battling gravity. What people don't realize is that when you're forced to lift a static weight like this, one that doesn't adapt or change while you use it, you're underloading yourself rep after rep. And this unnecessarily limits your ability to make improvements. With ARX, we've taken a totally different approach. We removed weights and gravity from the equation altogether. Instead, ARX combines our patented motorized resistance with our custom computer software to provide you with the world's safest, most effective, and most quantified form of resistance training ever. When you train with ARX, you are training to your perfect level of resistance, both positively and negatively 100% of the time. No more guessing what weight to use. ARX does all of that for you, instantly and automatically. We'll also track and measure every second of every rep, so you can quantify all of your workouts to find out if you're improving and by exactly how much. Whether your goals are bigger muscles, increased strength, stronger bones, or just to look good in a bathing suit, ARX can help you achieve all of these and more, but do so in a fraction of the time it would take compared to traditional equipment. If you're looking for the most efficient, most effective, and most quantified piece of exercise equipment on the market today, then look no further than ARX.
Thanks, Mike. That all sounds really impressive. If you'd like to learn more about ARX, visit arxfit.com and mention that you heard about ARX on the High Intensity Business podcast to receive an exclusive deal of $500 off shipping and installation of your ARX machines.
And what's your current training look like, Lawrence? Maybe you could talk people through one or more of your workouts, the frequency, the number of sets, et cetera. What's it look like? And do you do anything in addition to the strength training sessions, like cardio or, walking, mobility, et cetera?
Yeah. So I will tell you, to make this not boring, I will not tell you what I've been doing recently, because I actually injured my shoulder playing basketball.
Another basketball injury.
Yeah, another one. Exactly. Don't play basketball. Unless you can earn millions of dollars. And so because of that injury, I've not been able to play basketball, and I've not actually been able to train properly. And it's basically like shoulder tendonitis the bicep tendon, and it's been really debilitating, and it's actually been in the lingering around now for a few months. And I've got some things on the go, some new workout programs to address that, and I've had some very, very smart people help me with that, which I'm very grateful for if you're listening. And so hopefully we'll heal that, and it will be back to normal soon. However, before that happened, I was doing a training program which was created for me by my friend and one of my podcast guests, Gary Knight, who's a Aussie high intensity trainer. Really smart guy, really, really good guy. And so I was doing which is a little bit counterintuitive to obviously what we've been saying, but it was a freeway split. So it was 3 workouts done Monday, Wednesday, Friday. One was a push routine. So things like chest presses, dumbbell overhead press, lateral raises, any sort of pushing away from the body movements done with a single set to muscular failure. Then a pull routine, so pull downs, rows, shrugs, things like that, bicep curls, the all important bicep curl, and then a legs routine, which would suggest, things like leg press, leg extension, calf raises, things like that. But it was still a very brief routine. So each workout would probably only take me 10 to 15 minutes. But it was slightly higher frequency. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, with a likelihood that after doing it for a certain amount of time, I'd probably move to a twice a week protocol. So you're looking at twice a week, 10 to 15 minutes per session. And then kind of prior to that, I was doing typically twice a week, machine-based training. So just probably doing AB routines. So the reason for the AB is because I tend to do better on lower volumes, so less exercises. But obviously the downside to that is you may cover less musculature, and ideally your program should cover the entire body over a period of a week or two. And so I would do AB routines just to make sure that I got enough volume over 2 sessions to cover my entire body. So that's my kind of situation, kind of recent routines I've been doing. I mean, more recently, my routine. So I did one yesterday. And I had very little time yesterday, and so I had to kind of sneak a home routine in. And I've got, a chin-up bar and bits and bobs that I can use at home in order to get a workout in. And that was just a full body workout with some time static contraction neck work, so neck extension, neck flexion. I'm sure Scott can perhaps link to some stuff that might explain what that is to people, because I'll be here all day explaining it. And then chin-ups. Push-ups, rows with a TRX type device, crunches, prone trunk extension, which is just a movement for the lower back. And then I finished up with a load of shoulder rehab stuff, which included a shoulder isometric exercise, which I don't know how else to describe, but it's kind of basically contracting the shoulder in 4 different positions. And then also some isometric external rotation, internal rotation work, which is really just to try and rehab and strengthen my right shoulder. I also started doing some hanging, courtesy of Dr. Bryce Lee, who I think was following, I think it's Dr. John Kirsch, who's kind of the expert when it comes to hanging and how it can improve shoulder strength and shoulder health. So I've been doing kind of like free 20-25 second hangs every day, actually, with the theory being that high volume approach to the tendons and ligaments in the shoulders might be better and more effective. And so, that's kind of what I'm doing. And then I don't play basketball at the moment. I'm almost, this is the first time I'm saying this, Scott, I might retire. I might give it up. I don't know. I don't want to, but the shoulder injury has been quite debilitating and at times almost quite depressing. And with a baby
really sorry
coming,
to hear that.
That's cool. With a baby coming, I actually want to be able to lift them up. And so there is that to think about. But who knows? Maybe I'll return to it in the future. But yeah, I mean, I try to be as active as possible. We have a small dog and I walk the dog 2, 3, 4 times a day. So that's kind of my cardio, quote unquote cardio. So that's it really from a training and a kind of movement perspective.
Yeah, sounds extremely healthy, and appreciate you going through that with people, because I think they'll be curious and really appreciate that. And I think it's a good overall model. But really sorry to hear about the injuries, Lawrence. I know how frustrating that can be, having sports injuries in the past myself.
Right. No, I appreciate that, mate.
And how about the nutrition side? Folks will be curious. I have a lot of folks on here who are fully carnivorous. I have folks on here who are not carnivore. I have folks on here who eat some meat, not a lot of meat. So don't feel bashful about anything. But curious what, your daily eating looks like, and maybe how it's evolved over time, alongside your training.
Yeah. So I have been heavily inspired by you, actually, on the eating front, certainly over the last couple of years, massively so. Like in terms of I'll just give you a quick view on how that's evolved for me. So I think I went from, obviously, like most people, standard American diet or something similar to that when I was younger and not really caring about diet, to very quickly being embarking on kind of a low carb keto approach, playing around with Tim Ferriss's slow carb diet, and then kind of moving more towards a more liberal low carb diet, which just seemed to work for me. I'm not saying that everyone should do that, or any of the diets I might mention here that everyone should do. It's just stuff that's really worked well for me. And I'm certainly not the nutritional expert. But I would say people that have really been a big influence on me lately are yourself, Scott, in terms of the stuff you've shared on Carnivore Cast. And then I just really like Dr. Paul Saladino. I've got a lot of time for that man. I think he's the first person who, well, I shouldn't say that, because there's a lot of people you had on your show that have been just awesome. But what I like about him is his ability to dive into the nuance and the biochemistry and actually talk about that in a carnivore diet context. Because I've not seen anyone do that until he did it. Not in the detail he does it.
Yeah, he has a unique
smart guy.
Combination. Sorry to interrupt. It being extremely articulate, very strong memory, strong critical thinker with a scientific base of knowledge. I think it's really and very charismatic, and I think it's rare to have all of those in one package.
The trifecta. Yeah. And he's also his recall is unbelievable. Like I can't, like, I listen to old podcasts I do, and I just kick myself, because I'm like, why didn't I remember that? I asked that same question 4 times. I mean, I don't know if that's happened to you, Scott, but I asked the same bloody questions, and it would sound like to some of my guests that I'm not really learning anything, because my recall is not like this guy. But yeah, so he's been enormously influential. And so at this point, my diet is pretty much, I would say 95% carnivore. Typically I'm eating twice a day. At the moment, I skip breakfast. I typically have my first meal around anywhere from kind of 11 to 1 in the afternoon. And then I have my dinner I try and have it around 5-6 p.m. And that's more because of the whole like circadian rhythm thing, and not wanting to eat too late, because it really does seem to affect my sleep. And my meals usually consist of, I eat quite a lot of ground meat, and ribeye, egg yolks, liver. I eat quite a lot of liver now. I tend to season it all with the sea salt that you guys typically recommend. I think it's the Redmond sea salt.
Yeah.
So I use that. But I do deviate. I do have, if the missus wants to cook a vegetable bake thing, I'm going to eat it. I might have the odd chocolate bar like once a week. I don't tend to have cheat days anymore. I used to have these days where I went absolutely bonkers and eat loads of crap. But I do not think that they're very intelligent things to do anymore. But I will, if let's say, a Saturday, a typical Saturday might be, I might fast for practically the entire day. I might make sure I get some liver or some kind of highly nutritious food in there. But then I might go out for dinner with a friend or with, my fiance, and then I'm quite liberal and I'll just eat, whatever's going, and I'm not too fussed about that. Like I will say I do have a kind of conflict. I still have conflict with this, Scott, and you and I have spoken about this tons.
Yeah.
About this whole balance between quality of life and pleasure, happiness, versus eating this perfect diet. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I think that you can have it all, in that if you can eat a purely healthy diet, which let's say for argument's sake, a pure carnivore diet is the healthiest, most optimal diet there is, that you could be incredibly happy and be quite content foregoing all of those cheat foods, knowing that you feel wonderful every day, right? And certainly, I see that in you, Scott. I see that in my friend Untitled over in the Netherlands, and a couple of other guys, Mark Strauss, another one, where you guys just, to me, seem to have this awesome discipline, and you inspire me. And the way I see it is, as I go through my own nutritional journey, I'm sort of trying to get to where you are, but I'm not quite there yet. But I'm making improvements every single day. Yeah. I was addicted, for instance, dark chocolate was my thing, right? So I was having dark chocolate once or twice a day, quite a lot of it, and I have just got rid of it completely. And I've had no cravings for it. Yeah. I think it was someone scared me away with heavy metals or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, so, I don't think I've come around, on thinking, 100% compliance all the time is optimal and that'll make you the happiest. I think it depends on the person. I think for someone with autoimmune conditions, who, has a flare up or an issue with their gut or their skin or their mind or their arthritis, if they have even a small amount of something off of a fully carnivorous, fully, animal-based diet, then they should probably stick to it, and they will be happier if they don't, quote unquote, I don't even like the word cheat, but eat a food outside of their normal eating pattern. But I think for someone like you who's healthy and has great metabolism, works out, normal body weight, just like you said, if it improves your quality of life, if you're in a social setting and it makes you feel better and more connected with the people you're with, and you have a pizza or a beer or two, and you're back on it the next meal, the next day, I really can't see that 5 or 10% affecting you super negatively. And I mean, you're talking about having a chocolate bar every few days. It's probably like a nice, healthy, high cocoa dark chocolate bar, right? So
oh, not really.
Okay. Well, anyway, it's still not a big deal if you don't feel it affecting you super negatively all the time. You probably don't feel great for a few hours afterwards, but life is short, and I prefer being 100% compliant when I'm doing something. There are a lot of people who can moderate better than me, and I sometimes envy them. And there's something to be said for that. I especially think when you combine it with an intelligent strength training, resistance training program, it can really moderate a lot of the effects of these negative health foods. People did not get sick and fat who are exercising well, like you and I are, metabolically healthy, low body fat, and then they started eating, fruit and rice and potatoes or maybe even like pizza once a week, and then all of a sudden they're overweight, metabolically diseased, and all these things. The problem started from eating these ultra processed foods all the time, 24/7, and not exercising and not getting proper sleep and managing stress and all these things. So it's a little bit of a rant, sorry, but I just really changed my mindset on it a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. I will just correct. I don't typically have, I'm just a bit embarrassed about this. I don't typically have a chocolate bar every few days. I would say that every now and again, rather than save maybe that less healthy meal for a Saturday evening, I would maybe have some random treat, so to speak,
sure,
for want of a better label, during the week. So I don't want people thinking that every 3 days I'm devouring a Mars bar.
Yeah. yeah. And I think that's fine. Someone who I'm super excited to have on the show soon is Jerry Teixeira. I'm sorry, I can't pronounce his name correctly, but JT. He has Body Weight Strength on YouTube and on Twitter, and he's extremely healthy, ultra jacked, great father, great guy, teacher, very generous individual. And I think up until very recently, he was essentially carnivore plus some dairy. 100% of the time, and then every 2 weeks he'd go out for dinner with his kids and have a ton of sushi or a pizza. And I think that's just a very healthy way to live if that doesn't exacerbate some underlying health condition or other issue for you.
Yeah, I agree. That name rings a bell, actually. I think I might have seen his work. No, it looks pretty good. Yeah, I mean, it's difficult, right? I heard Ben Greenfield and Paul Saladino talking about this, and I kind of somewhat agree with Ben when he talks about just how food is so interwoven with culture and tradition, that it's hard sometimes to remain so disciplined or strict during some of these kind of family or social gatherings. And I think that's something I really admire about you, Scott, is like, I know some people might think, they hear what you do when you're with family over Christmas and that you're just eating like, I don't know, whatever it is, an entire joint of meat or whatever. And they think, there's something wrong with that. And I'm like, no, like if he's fine, it's down to the individual. If he is happy and can behave normally and do that and have no issue, then I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
And it really depends on who you are and your preferences and how you behave in those certain settings, given those options. So
totally.
I agree with much of what you said.
I think it's fine to be 100% compliant if that's what you prefer. I think the problem arises when people have this air of moral superiority by saying, what's wrong with you? Can't you just tell people you don't want that? Or why can't you just always be compliant? Like, why do you need to derive your happiness from food? Blah, blah, blah. I think, people just shouldn't judge each other too harshly for things like that. Anyway, moving on a little bit. How has changed your style of eating? How has your current style of eating, affected your physical and mental performance?
So I would say I've had a few really interesting observations. So firstly, one thing I love about the carnivore diet is that I just do not feel hungry very often. It's very satiating, right? I think that's a common report you get from people that do this. And so, I can quite happily do even one meal quite often. It's perfectly fine for me. And so from an efficiency point of view, going back to efficiency, it's very attractive. But a couple other things I've noticed is when I'm really good with it and I stick to it for a long period of time, my sleep requirements are a really interesting change. So I noticed that I will wake up at sometimes 4:30, 5 in the morning, having had maybe 6-7 hours sleep, and be just ready to go, just ready to just on fire, like ready to wake up, seize the day, crack on and be industrious. And it's like, it's very stark. I don't feel like, people might hear that and say, oh, that's very cute, but that's hardly scientific. And it's probably not. But for me, it's like, it's a very clear kind of correlation with when I changed my diet to that. I just seem to wake up, really early quite often and just ready to go and feel really inspired. So that's interesting. And when I do deviate off it, when I start having more carbohydrate, more cheese, dairy, what have you, or even some of the less healthier options, I don't get that. I don't get that benefit.
Yeah.
And so I don't know why that is. Maybe you could educate me, Scott, but I'm guessing it's got something to do with perhaps the detoxing or the production or processes that are happening during sleep that just seem to be less encumbered and more efficient during those hours. And so perhaps I need less time to get that job done. And so that's been really interesting. Just having more energy in the morning. And then I would just say, generally speaking, my ability to have focus, throughout the day is greater. So, I've already had a pretty productive morning. It's 2:15 in Ireland right now. And I feel quite cognitively healthy, and high energy-ish for this time. Whereas I can't say that when I'm on, other diets. And so I think that may play a role for that as well. From a body composition point of view, I'm effortlessly able to stay around 10% body fat, which I wasn't surprised about, that would be one of the outcomes. So from a muscle mass perspective, I haven't checked it in probably a month or so. But I would say for me, it would seem that my muscle growth is very, very slow now where I am in my training. I mean, we could debate that at length, Scott, because I know that you've made changes that have been really positive for you in that regard. But I'm not sure if for me, it's made a big difference from a muscle gain perspective. But then you could argue, well, if I did 100% carnivore, very strict, much like you, Scott, for a long period of time, would I see a big benefit in terms of the aesthetic and, my amount of muscle mass? Possibly. So yeah, who knows? Maybe we'll experiment more with that in the future.
Yeah. Super interesting. And I've experienced a lot of the same benefits myself, but always good to hear from you. And thanks again for the kind words regarding inspiring you. If anything, all I've done is repackage and regurgitate what much smarter people have said. And what challenges, Lawrence, are you trying to solve both personally right now and same for professionally? What things are you working on? What are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I think personally, I'm trying to rehab this shoulder is my real focus right now. It's just trying to live a lifestyle, follow certain movement patterns that just don't impact that recovery in a negative way, and then train appropriately. So that's really my focus. Personally, in my own training, I've got a baby coming in November, so that's 2 months away. So I'm under a fair bit of pressure to deliver financially and in terms of being there and all of that. I've got some very exciting professional projects happening. Obviously, I've got very much focused on the HIT Business membership, which is my product behind the High Intensity Business blog and podcast, where I help people privately grow their high intensity training business with proven blueprints that I've put together with the best in the industry, people like Luke Carlson and Paddy Durrell, and these people who have really nailed the systems that help build a successful business. And we also have monthly Q&As in there where you get to ask these people questions live every single month. And there's a community of high caliber, high intensity training business owners and trainers and scientists who are there to help each other within the forum and help you with your business and your training. And we've pretty much got all the big names in high intensity training, or at least most of them within the community now, which is awesome. But related to that, one of my projects I'm so excited about is, and you might not know, Scott, is I'm actually opening a studio here in Galway, probably in January 2020. So January 2020 is our rough date. It's very kind of, approximate at this point. And what's really fun is I can take everything I've learned from the podcast and from the membership and actually implement that in our project. And then I can report back, I can document, I can create more value on the podcast and the membership, which is so exciting for me. I've just gone through a whole process, for example, where we've pretty much landed on what we want as the name of the business. Now, I can't say that yet because it's still confidential, but what's been really fascinating is learning how to come up with that name and talking to people how they name businesses. And so I've taken that entire standard operating procedure. How do you name a business? What are the filters that you use to think about your name for your business? Things like, do you need to get the .com if it's a global brand that you're going for? Does it relate to your strategic niche? These are the types of questions that will help you decide on things like that. And so being able to actually map that out and put it in the membership as an SOP, as a checklist for people, is so useful to the members, right? Because if you're thinking about starting a studio and you're like, oh, what do I name it? I have no idea. Here you go. Here's a solution for that. So it's what I'm trying to say is all of the projects that I'm working on are all very kind of symbiotic. They all kind of feed into and help one another, which just gives me an enormous amount of motivation. And so professionally, the two main projects for me are really growing the membership, producing great content and value in there, starting the studio, but then continuing with the High Intensity Business podcast. And, I produce 2 episodes at the moment every single week on the subjects of personal training and also growing your high intensity training or personal training studio. So yeah, loving it, loving life.
That's awesome. It sounds like you've done a beautiful job of integrating, your passions, work, life, and also multiple businesses that interrelate and benefit from one another, which I really respect. And I'm super glad for you. And so I'll link to everything in the show notes at carnivorecast.com, Lawrence, but where can people find out more about you and what you're up to?
I would just send them to highintensitybusiness.com.
Great.
You go there, you'll be able to go to the contact button and you can send me an email. My email address is there. So yeah, happy to help anyone who's got questions about this way of training or anything else we talked about.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time today, Lawrence. It's been a real pleasure have you on. I think you've delivered a ton of value for the listeners, and always great to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Scott. It's been an honor. Thank you.
Discover how to achieve your health and fitness goals, become a great personal trainer, and build a successful high-intensity training business. Check out highintensitybusiness.com. highintensitybusiness.com.
This episode is brought to you by ARX, the most innovative, efficient, and effective all-in-one exercise machines I have ever seen. I was really impressed with my ARX workout. The intensity and adaptive resistance was unlike anything I've ever experienced. I love how the machine enables you to increase the negative load to fatigue target muscles more quickly, and I love how the workouts are effortlessly quantified. The software tracks maximum force output, rate of work, total amount of work done, and more in front of you on screen, allowing you to compete with your previous performance to give you and your clients real-time motivation. The ARX uses a computer-controlled motor to give you the exact amount of resistance your clients need 100% of the time. This means that the resistance can never become dangerous, is intuitive and simple to use, and can provide you with all of the results you and your clients are looking for in a fraction of the time. ARX is highly effective and efficient in delivering all of the benefits of exercise, including increased strength, muscle mass, cardiovascular conditioning, bone mineral density, and injury recovery. As well as being utilized by many high-intensity trainers to deliver highly effective and efficient workouts to their clients, ARX comes highly recommended by world-class trainers and brands, including Bulletproof, Tony Robbins, and Ben Greenfield Fitness. To find out more about ARX and get $500 off install when you place an order, please go to arxfit.com and mention HIB, that's High Intensity Business, in the How Did You Hear About Us field. So again, to get $500 off install when you place an order, head on over to arxfit.com and enter HIB in the How Did You Hear About Us field.